excited. So I just said my name, but in case you didn't catch it, my name is Desiree. So I am the young adults pastor, like Pastor Avery said. So that is people ages 18 to 35. Okay, so that's basically for old people. So if you see a few people here who look kind of old, people who have maybe some gray hair like me, yes, like me, I am old. I'm not ashamed of it, okay? But anyways, that is my job. And I actually used to be a leader here like years ago, okay? So a year and a half ago I was here. And then even when I was working at a different church, I was a leader at Archetype for preteens. Isn't that crazy? So I've been around for Archetype for a long time. I actually went to Bible college with Pastor Avery over here. Woo, woo. Exactly, and I'm pretty sure I only got a job here at Broadway because of Pastor Avery and Pastor Nathan. Okay, you didn't have to bring that up. I feel like that wasn't fair. But anyways, it doesn't matter because I'm not the preteen pastor anymore, and other people have moved on to bigger and better things. But because I'm still getting to know some of you guys, I think I know like half of you, I wanted to let you know a few things about me, okay? So I didn't grow up in a Christian family. I think around grade 4 or 5, my mom and I, we started going to church, and when we started going to this church, that's where I became a Christian. That's where I got baptized, and I gave my life to God. I said, I want to follow you, God, for the rest of my life. But then the next year, my mom and I moved to Ontario, and life just happened, and I kind of stopped going to church. So I would have said that I was a Christian, but I wasn't really, living the Christian life. And it was like that until grade 11, okay? And so grade 11, my mom decided that she wanted to go back to church. And so the church that she wanted to go back to was a Christian Reformed church, so a really traditional church. And I hated it, guys. So when I say traditional, what I mean is like we have a screen with the lyrics. The way that this church had it set up is like they had two wooden signs on the side, and then they would put the page number of the hymns on the side for the day. So there was no lyrics on the screen. So you would look at the little wooden slot, and it would say, go to page 1000. You would open up your hymn book, and that's how we would sing songs, okay? That's what I mean. There literally wasn't even a screen. It was so old. Literally, the pastor lived on the property. I just felt like I didn't really fit into this church. And at this church, there was a very clear distinction from the people who grew up there and the people who didn't, okay? So that was basically me and like 2 other people. But basically, the people who grew up there, 97% of them were Dutch, okay? I kind of thought that most of them were related, but I can't really prove anything. Most of them were homeschooled. All the girls dressed like, with long skirts. They didn't wear any makeup. And then, then there was me. I have some pictures. Some of you guys have seen some of these pictures before about what I look like compared to everybody else, okay? Just wait for it, guys. Maybe we get a drum roll. Okay, yeah, fine, whatever. But most of you have actually even seen that, so I thought I'd bring like a few more. Like, let's look at a different one. Okay, that was me in high school, okay? So like everybody was wearing pink. There was lots of makeup. There was blonde hair. This was just embarrassing. It's embarrassing. Okay, next one. Okay, and that is me at my prom, okay, guys? That is me at my prom. Those were like my best friends. But this was me when I was in high school. So I was going to this church where everybody was like really traditional. Everybody was homeschooled, and I wasn't really like fitting the bill. I didn't really fit in with those people. And on top of that, okay, wait, in 1 second, you should take this away, but everybody, wait, go back for 1 sec. But remember what that guy looks like, okay? Because he matters for after. Just take a mental picture right now. Okay, relax, okay. Anyways, so also in this church, there was only one family that had a divorced person, which is my family, which was my mom. And so I just felt like I didn't fit in with anybody. And I'm not saying everybody was mean to me, but I'm saying that I just felt different. I'm just saying that, I didn't really fit in. And on top of that, this church was so small that they didn't have a youth pastor. So their youth group, which was on Friday nights, which was the best night of the week for me, was full of 40 to 50-year-old youth leaders who really wanted to like love people, which is super great. But I didn't want to be a part of that. I had decided that I wasn't really interested in going to youth group. I didn't have anything like Archetype here. So yeah, I decided youth group was not for me, but my mom had decided something totally different. So every single week, Friday would roll around, we would get into a fight about why I had to go to youth group. Basically, she would threaten to take away my phone, and I would end up going. And so I started attending youth, but the only thing to like really get me through youth was that guy, Matt. Okay, stop. Okay, so Matt went to school with me, but he also went to church with me, and he was kind of like me. Like, he was also Dutch. He also grew up with lots of those people, but he was a black sheep, okay? He was involved in a lot of the things that I was involved with. We were supposed to get married, but it didn't really work out. It didn't really work out, but that's okay. But anyways, my mom would drop me off. I'm going to youth, and probably like my fourth time, as I walk into the building, Matt is waiting for me, and he's like, do you want to get out of here? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. Let's go out of here, get out of here. So right across the street from the church was a bakery called Nino de Versa. We went to the bakery across the street, and we smoked. What did we smoke? It doesn't really matter. I'm just telling you the truth, guys. I'm literally telling you the truth. You can't judge me. Who are you to judge me? That's what I thought. I didn't want to go to youth group. So we are at Nino de Versa, we are talking, we're having these wonderful deep chats about our life, and out of the corner of my eye, I see Pastor Morven turning the corner. And we got caught. I was really smart. I dropped whatever was in my hand and I put my foot over it, but Matt didn't. So we actually both got kicked out of youth group. So Matt was never allowed to come back. I was on probation. But I wasn't really upset about it because I didn't want to go to church. I wasn't really interested in the things that they were teaching. I was interested in a lot of other things. I was interested in, different things that weren't happening at church. And so this is the point where I think my mom kind of gave up on me, and she didn't care anymore. She didn't care if I went to youth group. And like I said, I was okay with it because I didn't want to go. But have you ever felt like that? Like, maybe you haven't felt as extreme as high school Desiree, like around the corner at Nino de Versa smoking, but have you ever wondered, why do we even come to church? Right? What's the point? Why do we gather? Why do Pastor Avery and Nathan set up all of these curtains and do all this work? Why does the band practice? Why are we here? But it's a good question to ask, because more and more in my life, I run into people who are like, hey, well, I'm not attending church, but I would definitely consider myself someone spiritual, okay? So like the church, they have really good, a really good heart, but in terms of their rules, a lot of their rules are kind of out of date. A lot of their rules in terms of sex or gender, I don't really think are relevant to my life. So I would say I'm spiritual, but I don't attend church. Or I run into people who are like, I once went to church, but I got really hurt. The pastor treated me poorly, the people were hypocrites, something happened, and why would I go back to that? I don't want to go to church anymore, which kind of makes sense to me. Or what about people who are just really busy, right? They don't have a problem with the church. They think the church is a good thing. There's nothing against the church, but they're busy, right? They have sports, they have tutoring, they have friends, they have a life. Church is just not a priority for them right now. There's lots of reasons why people don't come to church. And on top of that, life is just hard sometimes. I know for me, when I'm going through something really hard, the first thing that I start to do is to pull away from people. That's the first thing that I want to be away from, is actually the church. That's when I start to be like, do I have to go to church today? Even though I'm paid to go, that's the where I find myself. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're in the series. Pastor Nathan has been preaching through, probably, and I think Joe, right? Joe preached too? We're talking why, though. Yes. We're talking about why do we do the things we do. And we're talking about today is, why do we come to church, okay? So when we look at the life of Jesus, if you know the story, Jesus, he comes to earth, he is crucified, he's resurrected, and then after Jesus is resurrected, he hangs around for, does anyone know how many days? How long does Jesus hang out for? I'm just curious. Jesus is resurrected. He dies. He's resurrected. And how long does he stay? Guys, come on. Oh, yeah, you could just say it. 40 days. Good job. So he hangs out for 40 days, and then he heads into heaven. He ascends into heaven. No, guys, it's 40 days. I promise you. I just read it. And the only physical thing that Jesus leaves behind when he heads into heaven, the only thing that he leaves behind for his people is not a coin collection, is not some set of instructions on how to grow the church, but he leaves behind a group of 120 people. That's it. And this group of people, this is the first church. They don't know it at the time, but they literally are about to change the world. And they're the reason that you and I are in this room today. They're actually the reason that we can even ask the question, why do we go to church? Because without them, we wouldn't even have a church. And so this all takes place in Acts 1 and Acts 2. And in Acts 2:42, right above it, does anyone have their Bibles? If you have your Bibles or your phones, it says this heading over it. It says, the believers form a community. In Acts 2:42, right above. So this is the moment in biblical history where the church becomes official, and this is what it says, okay? It's going to be on the screen behind me. It says, all of the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper and to prayer. And all the believers met together in one place and shared everything that they had. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. They worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity, all praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all people. And each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who are being saved. So at this point in the Bible, the way that God was moving, he was actually using his people. He was using the Israelites. But all of a sudden, in the book of Acts, God wants to do something new. And this new thing is the church. And when I say the church, I'm not talking about a building, right? When we leave here during the week, this is a food bank. If we all went outside and had this service, we would still be the church. So when I'm talking about the church, I'm talking about you and I. And so when I ask myself the question, why do I even come to church? This is what I look at. I look at the original church because this was before there was no cults, there was no pastoral scandals, there was no Joel Osteen, there was no weird religion. This is the church in its origins. This is the church in its purest form. And when I look at the early church and I try to figure out why did they decide that they wanted to gather, this is what I see. And the first thing I see is that the early church, they were devoted to each other. Verse 42 tells us that all the believers, they devoted themselves to fellowship and to sharing in meals. And it goes on and talks about how they basically did life together. And in Greek, the word fellowship, because fellowship is a little bit of an old school word, the Greek word is koinonia. And guys, by the way, I actually did take Greek with Pastor Avery. I think Pastor Avery probably got like 99.9% of the in the course, literally. I got 53%. It's a really hard class, but I still passed, okay? But anyways, this word in Greek literally translates to community. It translates to participation. It translates to intimacy. These people, they were devoted to one another. They weren't just meeting once a week, saying hi, and then running into their house and locking the door, never talking to each other until the next Sunday. They were constantly seeing each other. They were doing life together. They shared everything that they had. They sold all their possessions. And what happens when they start to do life together like this, they actually really start to see each other. They're so close in community that when one of them is starting to struggle, everyone else around them can see it. And the genuine response to this struggle is that they start to help each other. They start to meet each other's needs. And this is more than, someone is tired and so you're buying them a Starbucks every single day. To me, what they're doing here is what is the distinction between just a group of people gathering together and the church. This devotion to each other, or in other words, a family, when people are really looking out for each other. In the book of Romans, the Apostle Paul, he kind of talks about the church, and this is what he says at the end of it. I think the verse is up on the screen, but he says, we all belong to each other. You and I, the church, we actually belong to each other. I think sometimes we just think about ourselves, right? But I belong to you. You guys belong to me. We are united. And this devotion is this deep understanding that we belong to each other and that we need each other. And maybe when I read the story in the book of Acts, when everybody's selling everything, you're thinking, Des, that's so extreme. Nobody could really sell their house and nobody could, sell everything and give it away. But we actually have other needs in our lives too, right? What about friendship? What about when we're walking through something really hard? What about when we're moving and we need help carrying boxes? What about when we're in this tough situation and we need someone older than us to give us advice? Or what about loneliness? I was reading this online, what is it called, article, this online article, and it was saying that right now in North America, we are in a loneliness epidemic. And it was saying that people who are lonely actually can die a premature death up to, with the same result as if you had been smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Isn't that crazy? Just from loneliness. That's how much loneliness can affect us. And Stats Canada, they say that right now in Canada, so this is not just America, 61% of young Canadians feel lonely all the time or some of the time. That's more than half of us. That's a lot of people. And it's not just loneliness, right? Anxiety disorders are up by 25%. Medical depression is up, so it's not starting at 29%, it's up. Medical depression in women, 29%, and in men, 24%. People have never felt more isolated or alone or sad. And maybe you're like, this is really depressing, and it kind of is depressing, actually. But what's great is that Jesus already has an answer to it. He already has a solution. The solution to our loneliness and our trials and all the needs that we're walking through is actually each other. Like, everybody look around right now. Everyone look. I want to see you looking. Look. This side, look. Look at each other. My goodness. Everyone around you, you are the solution to each other's needs. That is the answer. Why do we come to church? Because we actually need each other. Not just because, it's not just monetary, it's also other things too. Like I said, I used to come to youth like a year and a half ago, and I remember this one time there was this new leader that walked in. His name was Luke. Yeah. Guys, he's just like loving the applause back there. He's just loving. But anyways, I didn't really know Luke, and I remember he walked up to me and a couple people, and he asked like the dumbest question. He was like, are we supposed to sit with the youth or with someone else? And I'm like, where else would we sit? Is that what I said? I feel like I said something like really rude. I said like, where else would we sit? But I said it like really rude. And then Luke and I didn't talk for a long time after that. But if Luke was being petty, which sometimes he is, but he isn't sometimes other. Guys, stop it. It's all said in love. If Luke was being petty, though, Luke could have spent, all of this time in between ignoring me, and he would be fully justified in it because I was a little bit mean to him. But actually, what ended up happening is Luke and I became friends. Okay, I don't know how it happened, but it just happened. And I remember there was one point in January, February of my life, when I was just going through something so hard. Everything in my life, it actually kind of felt like it was falling apart. I felt like I was surrounded by people, but I didn't have anyone to talk to. I felt really lonely in it. I didn't know who to talk to about it even because I just felt like I'd be burdening everybody. It seemed like everyone else was going through something. And so just really silently, I was suffering on the inside. I stopped hanging out with people. I kind of took a step back. I was looking up jobs in Ontario. I was like, I don't know if I want to be here anymore. And I'm actually cannot express, I was at one of the lowest lows that I have been at in a really long time. And all of a sudden, I ended up becoming friends with this guy named Luke. And in the process of becoming friends, I really feel like Luke saw me, and I really felt like in the process of our conversations, he really listened to me. And all I needed in that time is I didn't need someone to sell their property like the people in the book of Acts. I actually just needed someone to talk through things with me. And when I look back at that time of January, February, I don't know how I got through it, but I remember Luke talking through everything with me, listening to me, not making me feel like a burden, not making me feel bad. And to me, this is just one example of what being devoted to each other looks like. It's really seeing each other in our needs. It's being the solution to each other's needs. It's in your crews. It's in your conversations with your friends. It's when you're serving at the Yukon or when you're here on band or wherever else, you can serve at youth. But it's when you really get to do life with a group of people who are devoted to you and who are devoted to God that you can really start to feel safe. And you can be the real you. So why do we go to church? Because when a community of people are devoted to seeing each other and accepting each other with our flaws and our mistakes, it really makes a difference. Devotion makes a difference in our lives. The second thing that I see from the early church is that they were devoted to growth. This passage says that they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. They devoted themselves to prayer. They were very intentional. And this point seems really obvious because, of course, when I'm talking about growth, I'm talking about their relationship with God. And of course, we come to church to learn about our relationship with God. But I think there's something really important about learning about God in community. God has actually designed us to learn about him in community. Luke 2:52, this is what it says. Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and all the people. Jesus himself, as he was growing up, as he was learning, he didn't only grow in learning about God, but he also grew equally with people. Even Jesus was doing it. These two things work together and they complement each other. So you can read as many sermons as you want and listen to all the podcasts and, do all the different things to try to learn about God. But if you aren't really living with people in community, if you aren't showing up and doing life with people, do you really learn to love people? Do you really learn to serve people? If you're not showing up constantly, do you really learn how to give and receive accountability or forgiveness? I don't think so, because it's so easy to try to love someone when you see them for 5 minutes, but it's when we're really with each other and we're doing life together that we start to drive ourselves crazy, We start to drive each other crazy, and that's where we really learn how to walk out our Christian faith. That's where we really learn how to love each other. And this community in Acts, they were committed to growing in their relationship with God, but also in coming to the church and in growing in the relationship with God, they also learned about themselves. When we are in community, we learn about our talents, our gifts. We learn about mentorship, accountability. It's where we really learn, like I said, how to live out the Christian life. And maybe you guys, have anyone heard this quote, show me your 5 closest friends, and I'll show you your future? Has anyone heard that? A couple people? Okay, see hidden hands. Okay, so actually think about that right now. Who are the 5 closest people to you in your life, okay? I'll give you a second. 5 closest people. Okay, so if you look at those people, these are actually the people that are influencing you the most. These are the people who are determining the course of your future. And when you surround yourself and you're coming to church and you're surrounded by people who are committed to growth, you will grow. You will grow in your relationship with God. You will grow in your gifts and in character. And the third thing that I notice when I look at the early church is really that they were devoted to the world. So what I think is so interesting is that the early church didn't grow when Jesus came back for 40 days. Because if I was Jesus and I just was risen from the dead, I think I would go up to every single person who, said I was a liar, and I would reveal myself to them. But Jesus didn't do that. Actually, he spent his time with that group of 120 people. But that's not when the church starts to grow. It actually says in the book of Acts that the church starts to grow when the believers devoted themselves to each other and to God. It says in verse 47, and each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. The Lord added to their community every single day. When you and I function as we actually should, when community is devoted to God and to growth and to each other, growth in number actually happens naturally. Isn't that so interesting? I actually think that's crazy because we don't need to stand on the street holding up a sign telling people, turn from your evil ways and go to Jesus. We don't need to do anything. We actually just need to be devoted to each other and devoted to God, and growth happens naturally. John 13:15 says, your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. When we are loving each other, when we are living our life the way the early church did, it really captures people's attention. And it did then, and it does now. And I shared with you guys some of my story. When I was in high school, I went down a totally not good path. I started drinking. I got involved in a lot of drugs, and I was really just lost. And I remember for the first time, after I graduated high school, I met this group of friends, and they didn't really like me because, I was popular, because I was partying. They actually liked me for me. So they started inviting me to things. They started hanging out with me, and I actually had never experienced community like that. And the thing that all these people had in common is that they were Christians. I didn't know that. And they started bringing me to church every single week. And it is in this community that I actually encountered God for real. It's not because, someone told me, Des, you shouldn't be drinking, you shouldn't be smoking. Lots of people said that to me, but I didn't care. It was actually when people really loved me for me that I changed. And now I get to stand here years and years later, and my life has changed. My life has gone places that I never, ever thought it would. The best way that we can reach people around us is when we are in community and when we are devoted to each other and we're devoted to God and to growth, and it just happens naturally. That is how the early church spread from 120 people. I think the Christian church now is like 2 billion people. There was no Instagram, there was no commercials. The church just simply spread because people were committed and to loving each other. And so my question is, what about you? What are you devoted to? Maybe you're devoted to yourself, to your success, or your future, or to money. Or maybe you're devoted to doing what's comfortable, what's easy, hanging out with your friends, not really telling people that you're a Christian. Or maybe, like I talked about earlier, you've been hurt by the church. Maybe you're devoted to being committed to holding on to that unforgiveness. But what are you devoted to? Think about it, because we're all devoted to something. But I would suggest to you tonight that whatever you are devoted to is actually what directs your future. Whatever you invest your time and your energy and your heart into is going to directly determine who you turn out to be and who you are doing life with. And if we are only devoted to ourselves and our own success and our own money and our own comfort and holding on to, pain from the past, and I'm not saying, like, some of those things are bad, but not all of them necessarily have to be bad. But it's when they become our motivation that we will always end up lacking in the end, because we are the most richest, successful people on the planet that have ever lived, and we are the most unhappiest people. We are the loneliest people. We are the people who are filled with the most anxiety, constantly looking for things to make us feel better. But when we live a life that is devoted to each other and devoted to growth, we are actually living the most fulfilling life possible. We are moving towards a life that is filled with God and loving each other. And it actually says in the book of Acts that the early church, they were filled with genuine joy. And so again, I want to ask you, what are you devoted to? What in your life is the thing that you are moving towards? Because there's actually this invitation here, an invitation to a different kind of life. This invitation to maybe start serving at youth. This invitation to start showing up every single week, even when you don't feel like it. An invitation maybe to forgive those around us. Why do we come to church? We come to church because we get this family who is committed to each other through thick and thin. We come to church because we get to grow as followers of Jesus in our lives and in our gifts. And we come to church because we get to reach the world around us. So why don't you guys close your eyes, and I'm just going to pray to close.